this year some interactive workshops and webinars to assist you in your work. So it's really exciting to be here. Before we get going, just some quick background. The Good Food Standards were created by our Good Food Acquisition team. We'll talk about them in a little bit, but this is a subset of the food bank staff that is cross-functional, meaning very different departments working together to build a structure that will hopefully be something we apply across the network. And this is something that will be consistent across our network. So excited to be here with you. So looking at our agenda, we're going to go over a few things here. First, we're going to give you a little background on the Good Food Standards, how they came to be, why they're in place. Then we're going to get into a question to anchor the topic in your lived experience. So what does good food mean to you? And then we'll hop into kind of the nitty-gritty of the Good Food Standards. And again, you may remember hearing about this through our partner agency survey if you took it over the last few years. So we're going to break that down for you. This is our first formal way of getting into the Good Food Standards. We'll talk about the content. You'll notice that they will pertain mainly to food pantries, but they're to be applied throughout our network, including our community meal sites. We're still working on how to navigate the Good Food Standards with programs like our mobile food pantry. So that's part of our discussions, part of our exploration that we'll be talking about today and into the new year. So after that, we're going to go over with you the next steps for the Good Food Standards. So what's going to happen after this webinar? Hopefully, we take this nice time together, we learn from each other, we pose some questions, we get some ideas flowing. We're going to see how we can continue this conversation through the new year. And then finally, we'll have a group discussion, get your reactions to these Good Food Standards, which again is a draft, is something in place that we want your commentary on. And we'll ask you how you're bringing them to life. Many of you already are probably doing a lot of this stuff when it comes to healthy food access, food that is culturally preferred by many groups, food that is safe, that's high quality. It's happening. At the same time, there are many challenges that our network may face. Well, we're here today as a group to work together, Food Bank and the network, to discuss ways to bring this to life. So we're excited again to be here. And I'm not the only one who's going to be presenting, so you don't have to hear my voice the whole time, which is wonderful as far as I'm concerned. But our presenters include myself, and I'm joined by 4 colleagues, all in the Community Impact Department, and we're part of this health and nutrition kind of division. Now, we like ice cream, we like cupcakes, absolutely. And that's part of our discussion today, and we'll hit on some other healthy foods too. But I'd like to introduce the 3 other companions who are with me today. And there's some other food bankers out there too who will probably hop into breakout sessions, but I'm going to introduce each of them and they're just going to say a quick hi. So first, Caitlin Price, our Health and Nutrition Programs Manager. You may be familiar through food safety trainings.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. And I do recognize some names and faces from food safety training. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Caitlin. We also have Mara Benner, who is our Just Say Yes to Fruits and Vegetables Community Health and Nutrition Coordinator, working with our Healthy Pantry Initiative and other activities.
Great to see you all this afternoon. I also see some familiar faces, so I'm excited to get to speak with you all more today.
Thanks, Mara. And we also have Sam Hansloven, who is our Just Say Yes nutrition educator, visiting many of our food pantries and community sites offering direct workshops through Just Say Yes.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here today. Some of you I might currently work with, or we have spoken via email about the nutrition workshops, but I'm happy to talk more with you today and get to know some of you more.
Awesome. Thank you all. We're looking forward to an invigorating conversation. So let's talk a little bit about background. Many of you, as I mentioned, took part in the partner agency survey, and I have to have a call out to both Jennifer Bertrand and Catherine Miller at the Food Bank of the Southern Tier for the last few years, building this amazing survey, which has developed amazing results, learning about our network, both from the agency perspective and the client perspective. So one of the questions in the agency survey, you may remember from the last few years, was, do you know about the Good Food Standards? And it was kind of tricky because we didn't have established good food standards. So we weren't quite sure what agencies were answering. So it could have been you were answering about the Food Bank Partnership Agreement and what's involved in that big document, right? Or it could have been The food bank nutrition policy, which was created in 2016, focused on the acquisition of healthy foods into our network, lean proteins, fresh produce, whole grains, and excluding the distribution of soda, energy drinks, and candy. That's part of it. Or it may have been the nutrition ranking program on our food bank menu, which has the choose often, the choose sometimes, and the choose rarely options to help guide those who are ordering food to make some healthy choices when they provide for their community sites. Or maybe it was the HIPNAP nutrition standards that many of our partners are familiar with. When you have a HIPNAP food grant, again, this is the Hunger Prevention and Nutrition Assistance Program through Department of Health. Some of our pantries and other sites have access to grants, and those grants are tied with specific foods that they can acquire off of our menu. Was it that, or was it perhaps even the HIPNAP 3-day or 5-day food package guide? A lot of those things, and actually you're going to find out these are part of them, but also it's much more when it comes to food acquisition, nutrition, and then we get into some other characteristics we're going to describe to you in a little bit. So hopefully we're going to offer you some clarity as to what these good food standards are. Now, before we dive into that, I'd like to just anchor this in the food bank values. So a lot of what is driving the good food standards is the backdrop of the values of the food bank, which include integrity, respect, caring, learning, inclusion, and abundance. And to a large extent, these core values play a role in our client-centric focus as a network. Seeing that the people we serve are the main target of what we do. So every decision we're making, whether it's regard to food, impacting households, how do partner agencies influence what we're providing? And that's really where the partner agency survey, for example, comes into play, and the client survey comes into play. In fact, I just heard this afternoon that we released the client survey yesterday, and it went to about 20,000 participants, and we've gotten over 1,000 responses as of early this morning, pointing to just how engaged our network is, but also how we're going to get some valuable feedback from participants when it comes to services, the food they're accessing, and so on. I also want to hit on going back to some of our partners and how they influence our good food standards that you're going to see. One, Department of Health Hunger Prevention Nutrition Assistance Program, or HIPNAP, that has influenced the food bank very deeply with values of food safety, food quality, and nutrition. That program was created in the 1980s to address not only quantity food to the emergency food network, but quality food. And that's why we have a nutrition resource manager. We have Caitlin Price on staff, for example, to focus on those nutrition issues. It's a requirement to participate in HIPNAP that each food bank have at least one person focused on nutrition sourcing. In addition, we're connected with Catholic Charities. We're a regional agency, and Catholic Charities emphasizes the dignity of individuals and the dignity of households when it comes to many things, including choices of the food that they're bringing into their houses. And finally, Feeding America, the largest charitable hunger relief organization that supports food banks like ours, some 200 of them. They espouse many, many values, including that of equity. So how do we deploy our resources so that they're evenly, fairly, equitably distributed through our 6 counties in a way that recognizes that there may be some disparities? So all of this is figuring into what you're going to see when it comes to our good food standards. So at this point, we are going to go into a poll question. I think Caitlin's going to activate the poll for us, and we're going to give you a few moments to answer 2 questions. So the first question you'll see pop up on your screen. You can take a few moments to read through that and answer it, and we'll see the results. This will kind of give us an idea of who's out there in our audience.
Okay, it's looking like we've got most people answered. I'll give just a couple more seconds here in case anyone else has to still submit. Okay, so we've got quite a few answers. Thanks everyone for sharing a little bit about your role with your agency. Looks like for our first poll question here, it looks like 82%, 83% now of the people on the call here are actually directly ordering food from the food bank. So very, very involved in the food choices from our menu. We have 2 people that don't actually order the food, but they do provide input. 1 person who is not involved in providing input, but that they may assist with kind of other efforts within the pantry and be interested in this topic. And for our second question, we can move to our next slide here to show that second poll question. But it looks like we have got people doing all kinds of different roles with their agencies. So 16 people on this call do assist clients with food selection, maybe while they're shopping through the pantry or at the community meal site. We have 12 people, so a little over 50% that provide information on best by and sell by dates to clients. We have 50% of the people on the call here have used Healthy Pantry Initiative nudges, so recipes, meal ideas, other ways to kind of encourage people to choose different foods from the selection that you have available. We have 16 people collecting and acting on feedback from clients. And we have 6 people who have implemented an impact grant at their agency for culturally relevant or dietarily relevant foods. So that is really exciting.
Just want to point out one quick comment added in the chat, that someone also solicits vegetable donations and uses donated funds to buy fresh food. So thank you for adding your input on that as well.
Okay, so thanks everyone for your feedback there. And now we're about to hop into just a little bit of a discussion about what food or what meaning food has to you, maybe in your personal life, your family's life, your social network. And before we did that, we wanted to share this graphic that I think we all on our health and nutrition team really like this one, that just kind of points out the diversity and maybe the different types of meaning that food can have for us in our lives. So I know for me, when I hear the word good food, my mind immediately goes to, okay, healthy food and food that tastes good, right? And those are definitely a piece of the puzzle. But this kind of graphic I've always liked because it helps me kind of open my mind a little more to all the other ways that food is important to us. So starting on the right side here with moral, some people, food can be really important to them in terms of the impacts that their food choices maybe have environmentally or ethically, socially, in the way that food is produced. So that can be a really big thing for people. For some people, food has sacred meanings and may have ties to their religion or cultural backgrounds. Obviously, it has health implications for people. A lot of people's, focus when choosing foods might be their health and how that food that they're choosing might nourish them and help them thrive, both body and mind. And for a lot of us, food is social, right? So maybe you or someone you know is the person who always wants people to come over to their house for the holiday meals, or is the first person to bring a casserole next door when, when a family is going through something. And that food really has that social and connective meaning for you. And then finally, for some, food is a creative outlet. They like trying new recipes and, feeding their family or their friends with this kind of art form for them. So there's all kinds of different ways that food can be meaningful to us. So we wanted to kind of just acknowledge that and share this graphic before we jump into our next conversation here.
Thank you, Caitlin. So now that we've kind of established some different ways that food can have meaning in your life, we'd like to take this group and bring us into breakout rooms, which I have just established already, and just kind of have more of a discussion between ourselves about what are the different ways that food means to us. So we have 2 questions here, which I do plan to put in the chat. So hopefully you will be able to see them when we get into the breakout rooms. But in your groups, we'd like you to discuss these 2 questions. So what does good food mean to you? And how do you choose the foods you eat? And this can be based on the graphic you just saw. We like to show that just to give you some ideas of the different ways, or if there's something off of that that graphic. Aside from that, that comes to your mind when you think of good food and how do you choose the food that you eat. So feel free to use that resource or use other resources. And we're going to give you about 7 or so minutes, and then our co-hosts are just going to be popping into some of these groups to just make sure everything's good. And yeah, we will bring you all back then after 7 minutes. So anything that they'd be comfortable sharing with the group, any good discussions that came up, we encourage you to unmute and let us know.
Mara, I thought it was really interesting in our group with the second question, how much budget is factoring into that more than ever as a kind of a leading decision maker. And I know that a lot of our partners are dealing with that on the pantry level, not just, in homes.
Yeah, absolutely. I even see that on myself in the individual level about I used to shop at a certain store, now I shop at a different store because there's, you get more value for your limited budget. So that is absolutely true.
And Maura and Sarah, we talked about in our group how having options in our markets and in our pantries that are different kinds of healthy choices that maybe are prohibitive because they're so expensive in a regular supermarket, how it's really great having those kinds of different options available at times. Like this week, we have these nice fish fillets and just some different things that people, or the nuts are great because those are like luxury items for some family. And we love having
Absolutely.
those things available. And, they're good food. It's healthy food. So we appreciate that.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that.
Hi, Calvin from the Grace Community Meal Program. I'd just like to add that that's the thing that we really take into consideration when we put together meals. We try to prepare meals that we know are definitely outside of the budget of what our participants would normally have. For instance, tonight's meal is lasagna. Well, lasagna's got beef and sausage in it. They're getting a homemade rice pudding. They'll get salad and bread. So it's a full meal that they just normally don't get. But we always try to strive toward a upper quality meal like that, knowing that this might be the only really good meal they get all week.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for sharing.
Yep.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to share?
Mara, I think around the first question in our group, it was, obviously everyone wants to make healthful and nutritious decisions, but so much of it, like Calvin was just saying, is around the pleasure of sharing food or having a meal with people that makes it good. I think we automatically want to jump into the healthiest options, but I think that social aspect is super important too, with what we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe something along those lines I actually mentioned in the group I was in, where I think of good food in 2 different ways, where during the week I try my definition of good as maybe a more nutritious meal with some different vegetables, some healthier proteins, different things like that, where my good on the weekends is me getting to enjoy a meal outside the house or something like that. So how good kind of changes depending on the situation as well. So good point.
That's actually one of our rules at the Grace Meal Program. It is definitely not a takeout program. It's developed around socialization. And we actually encourage some parishioners from the church to participate and senior citizens to participate. And that gives everybody an element to mingle. And, the only time they get takeouts is at the end of the night. If there's stuff left over, we'll pack to goes. But we don't allow people to come in and say, oh, I just want one to go. That's not what the program's designed around. The program is designed around for them to have some socialization, and to be able to socialize with people that maybe might be above their means or have other thought processes that can help them, think outside the box a little bit.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing. It's that social aspect. The image that we got that from was from Leah's pantry training, which is they're in California, and they do a lot of different trainings for pantries and food banks and food distribution sites. And I believe that out of those 5 different kind of leaves of what food means to you, social is one of the greatest or the highest consistent ones that come up. So absolutely around that. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. If there's anyone else has some final thoughts, feel free to put it in the chat to share with everybody, and we'd be happy to share it at some point in the future in our meeting.
Thanks, Mara. And I'm thinking it would be great for people to look into Leah's Food Pantry. Sam, would you be able to put the Leah's Pantry site link in the chat? Folks will find some interesting material there, including the different meanings of food. And they do offer some different types of trainings. I think there's been some conversation about trauma-informed care, but they do focus on that nexus of how food has different meaning. So with that said, let's launch into the Good Food Standards. I'm going to share with you some aspects of the Good Food Standards, starting with this commitment document. I'm going to take you through a couple of the different lines, break it down, and you'll see some of the words highlighted in orange, and those are concepts that we're going to pick apart a little bit later, and then we'll share some of the action steps of the Good Food Standards. So the first sentence I want to share with you here is really basic. Our network is committed to distribution of products that meet our Good Food Standards. That's obvious, right? The next one is a focus. We focus on fresh, healthy, local, and perishable items. Not exclusively, but that is an aim. That is something we put emphasis on. And I think we heard in a couple of the breakout groups some of these aspects that, for example, perishable items could be tricky. They may not be as easily affordable for many people. So to what extent can we make those available along with some local, some fresh and healthy options? We're committed to having a shared understanding of the diversity in our communities and their food needs and desires while offering client choice. So in addition to aspects of health and fresh and perishable, recognizing that we all come to this table with different meanings to food, different needs and desires, and to what extent can our network offer choice to the greatest extent possible given circumstances. And that could be both for a food pantry and a community meal site. If it is possible that there be options at the meal site. We have some examples of that, but even getting input from the people you serve as to what's on the menu or what's available at the food pantry. And then the next statement, that we commit to acquiring and distributing food that follows standards established in the Food Bank's Feeding America contract. So just like many other organizations, including for-profit industry, the food bank is beholden to standards established in a contract that focuses on safety, quality, and the dignity of the people we're serving. That's kind of like the preamble of our Good Food Standards. And now we're going to go into the nitty-gritty, the aspects of the Good Food Standards. And the first section is this notion of quantity, providing enough food for people who are seeking food assistance, whether it's a pantry, a meal site, or a program that's serving the hungry. So the first one is quantity as it relates to access to at least 5 days of food per month per person. So I actually have a question for the group, and I want you to put your answer in the chat. Based on last year's partner agency survey, how many food pantries, let me change that. What percentage of food pantries do you think reported that they're meeting or exceeding at least 5 days of food per month per person? What percentage? Put your answer in the chat. And is Jen Bertrand on? She can't participate. But I would like Jen to reveal the answer once we get a few responses. And Sam, maybe give it a few moments and we'll see what everyone's thinking. I'm also going to exclude Catherine Miller from voting because she'll also have the number probably on the tip of her tongue. What kind of answers are we getting, Sam?
So we are getting quite a wide range of answers. Some people are saying all or 100%. And we have a range all the way down to as low as 20%. So very much across the board. Not really a lot of consistent answers on this one.
All right. Jen Bertrand, can I put you on the spot? Oh, she may not be on. All right. All right, so I'm going to represent Jen Bertrand, but 88% of our food pantries who responded in the survey said they provide access to at least 5 days of food per month per person. And that had been an increase over the previous year. So it is happening out the network. Some of the strategies there are finding ways, whether it's one visit or multiple visits, using the 5-day food package from the Hunger Prevention and Nutrition Assistance Program, which we have available. If you have any questions about that guide, please let us know. We can make sure you have access to that guide. It's a great reference, gives suggestions on how to hit each of the food groups in the different quantities using the My Plate as a reference. So that's something already happening. The other goal is a little bit more challenging, I think, to our network. So part of our good food standards includes a goal of at least 11 pounds of perishable foods per person per visit. And a good number of agencies are achieving this. You may say to yourself, where did the 11 pounds come from? Was it a magic number that some person developed in the back anteroom of the food bank? Well, actually, it's based on the 5-day package, right? So figure 5 days of food for 3 meals a day, that's 15 meals. And we figured based on our calculations of the average pounds per meal, then we figure, maybe 50 to 60% of the food is fresh. We arrived at 11 pounds. I don't want to get into the semantics, or the details, but around 11 pounds. So we have a good number of sites that are achieving this. And what's good is that we have a team here at the food bank that is devoted, our good food acquisition team, to providing access to perishable foods, fresh produce, frozen fruits and vegetables, lean meats and proteins. So we're not leaving you in the dark with this one, and we'll be willing to help you with that. So that's where on our next slide, you'll see some more detail on our good food acquisition team. So this team meets monthly, and it's devoted to looking at food trends, food coming in through our different sources, purchased, donated, and government commodity, emergency food assistance program, and ways that we can use all resources to make them available to our partner agencies, what the trends are, and also looking at grants that are available to us, in addition to other resources, recipes, et cetera, to help people and our partner agencies utilize the food they're receiving from us. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions in the chat or comments in the chat, Sam, related to quantity.
Yes, so we had a couple people asking for a copy of the 5-day guide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so is that
Mm-hmm.
found on our website?
We can find a link because I think we have a few versions in place, and we need to identify which one we're going to use. So we'll make that available on our website. We will let folks know. I think it also can show up in our partner newsletter. But if anyone on this call knows from the food bank where it might live, feel free to jump in now.
Great. And then one more question was regarding the amount of pantries participating in that 5-day package. This was more of a data question. How many people had responded in that survey? That would probably be a Jen question.
Yeah, and I know Jen's not on the call. I think it was something like 80 or 90%. I mean, the goal is 100%, and we've actually built in the partner survey into our agency renewals going forward, so it's actually kind of a requirement. But it was a big number. So, I mean, I'd say maybe 80 out of 100 pantries.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Sam. Any other questions you're seeing or comments?
That was all of them at this time.
Okay, great. Oh, okay. Is there one more? Did Calvin have a question or comment?
Yes, Calvin had a comment regarding not seeing a lot of fresh items available for order. And followed that up with, is this only available to pantries? Calvin, if you could give us just a little bit of background on that too, I think we'd be happy to answer that for you.
So I would recommend in the interim, Calvin, connecting with your programs and partnership coordinator, Aaliyah in Chemung County. I think you're in Chemung County because it could say Grace Meal site. Aaliyah can assist you with connecting you with the fresh produce and the menu. And if you're referring to the 5-day package, then it is something that it's focused on food pantries, but it's also something that can be utilized by community meal sites, at least for focusing on the My Plate and the balance of different food groups in a menu or a food package. All right, so I'm just going to wrap up here with some stats. So the food bank in 2023 was able to distribute 16.7 million pounds. And of that, 3.7 million pounds was fresh produce, which I think was our highest year to date. And we're excited about that. We thank you for your commitment. We also know you're doing partner-driven pounds. You're accessing food from other resources. Someone mentioned that earlier. Also wanted to continue to remind you that in terms of helping you with quantity of food, limited cold storage and variety was some of the barriers that agencies expressed to us during their survey that are limiting factors when it comes to quantity of food. And we do have access to grants and other means to support you. So please contact your program and partnership coordinator. We'll have their contact information later in the slideshow, but those resources are there to help you ensure a good quantity of food, including perishables. So with that, I'm going to see. We shift to the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin.
Thanks, Matt. So the next piece of our good food standards is around safety and quality. So the text on this slide is actually taken directly from our good food standards. So we'll kind of run through these quick and then we'll get into kind of the details of them on the next slide. But some of these important elements that we have lined out under safety and quality are just around acquiring food from reputable sources that we trust, distributing food in a time frame so that people have a reasonable amount of time to consume it and ensure that the quality is still in a good spot at that point. And then providing resources for educating clients about quality and safety, especially around sell-by dates, best-by dates, and how to store things to get the most shelf life out of them. So to break that down a little further, when we talk about safety, really what we're talking about is minimizing the risk of food hazards. So making sure that the food that we're providing is safe to consume for the clients. And then when we're talking about quality, usually how we lay that out is that we're talking about the freshness, taste, and texture of the foods, generally meeting people's needs. So some things that go into both of those, both on our end and on your end as agencies, would be things like reputable vendors. So, making sure that we are sourcing from vendors that are upholding high standards, proper storage, as we know, storing things with proper ventilation and at proper temperatures, both at the food bank, at agencies, and when clients bring that food home. Those are the things that are going to extend the shelf life of shelf-stable products and perishable products. So giving us a little bit of extra wiggle room and extended quality when we're storing those things properly. Timely distribution is also a huge one, and there's lots of steps that the food is kind of going through before it makes it to the client. So we want to make sure that when we are sourcing our food, that we bring it into the food bank and that it still has enough time at its peak quality and peak safety for it to go from us, maybe it's stored in our warehouse for a little bit, to you all as our partners, maybe it's stored at your site for a little bit, and then that the client can still bring it home and still have a reasonable amount of time to store it at home before it's consumed. So kind of lots of steps that this food is going through, and we want to make sure that we're timing it out right so that when it gets to the customer at the end and our clients and our neighbors, it is still how we want it to be. Another big piece of this is obviously client preference and the feedback that we receive from you all at partner agencies as well. Everyone is going to have a little bit different comfort level and different opinions on what safe is and what quality is. We try to lay out as much as possible the standards for safety, but quality is a little bit more subjective depending on kind of your personal opinion and things like that. And my Zoom screen is blocking my last bullet point, and I of course cannot remember what I had there.
Looks like
Education.
Education. Thank you, guys. Yes, so the education piece, obviously on our end, we are always trying to learn about what we can do to extend the shelf life of our products and making sure that we are up to date on the most recent food safety protocols and practices. We obviously share that with you all through our food safety trainings, but then we also know that you all have a really big responsibility and are asked probably pretty frequently from what I hear by clients about these best by dates. So making sure that communication is going all the way kind of through the chain and making it to the client, because as I know a lot of you have encountered, when a client maybe receives something that just upon first glance, maybe the sell by date is passed or the best by date has passed, that can be kind of a feeling of maybe not dignified, right? It doesn't feel good necessarily sometimes if you're not understanding kind of why our sell by dates are the way that they are. That's not always the best feeling to receive a product like that. So for us to all kind of be on the same page about what products are safe, how long past the best by date, and why that's the case, and for you all to be sharing the information that you share with your clients really helps with people kind of understanding how and when they can use foods and feeling good and safe doing so. So, and with safety and quality, because especially with quality, it can be a little bit subjective. These are some challenges that we run into on our end, and I assume you all probably run into on your end as well. First one is personal preference, like we touched on earlier. So, for example, if I go to the grocery store and pick out a head of lettuce, for me, I might be okay with, peeling a couple brown leaves off the outside and realizing that the inside product is still good and I'm okay with that. That's still a high quality piece of lettuce to me, for example. Maybe someone else goes to the grocery store or the pantry, and if they do see a couple brown leaves on the outside, that is not high quality to them. So all of us have a slightly different understanding or personal preference on what quality is. And even when we're just talking about the taste and texture of any given product, right? We're all going to have a slightly different preference on what our food is, what it tastes like, what it looks like, all that good stuff. So it's always really hard to meet everyone's personal opinions, but that's why we try as much as we can to get the feedback so that we can act on it, because especially if we're hearing something more than once, then we know that maybe in our good food acquisition team meeting, maybe this is a product that we want to take a closer look at. Another thing is brand. A lot of us have certain brands that we prefer or that we trust or that are familiar to us, and figuring out kind of maybe which products are worth offering brand name of versus which products are just as good maybe in a different brand that might not be as familiar to people can be a challenge as well, both for us at the food bank and I'm sure for you at your agencies. And then timing, right? So we talked about earlier all of the steps that food has to go through before it reaches the client, making sure that that's all timed out correctly so that it's still really high quality and safe by the time that it reaches the client. And at the end of the day, with these two kind of graphics down at the bottom here, a lot of this is kind of a balancing act. I know that we at the food bank and you all as agencies, like someone brought up earlier, are balancing kind of cost with quality perhaps. So we all want to be good stewards of the money that we have and stretch our dollars to make sure that we're getting the quantity that we need, while also trying to balance that with getting good quality food. So it's all a little balancing act that we're all kind of trying to tweak as we go. And then same thing with food waste and safe food. So we love all the initiatives that so many of you are working on with local grocery stores and recovering maybe donations from grocery stores that might have otherwise gone to waste. We want to make those healthy, safe foods available to the community and make sure we're capitalizing on that resource, while at the same time balancing that with safety and quality. So a lot of this is not an exact science, and we're always kind of going back and forth and weighing those things out. And finally, just to touch on some safety and quality in action. So some things that we do at the food bank and that you all participate in that can kind of help all of us in this journey to prioritizing safety and quality. One obviously would be the food safety trainings that we offer. We have our live quarterly Zoom trainings that anyone with your agency is welcome to attend with us. We also have a recorded training option for anyone who's not able to make those at their scheduled time. So always feel free to reach out to me if you'd like that link. And then for larger groups, if you, for example, have a big group of volunteers or staff members that would like to be trained all at once, we're always happy to provide in-person on-site trainings as well. So lots of resources there to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as food safety goes. We've also done some work to develop client resources, since we've heard from you all how much you are explaining to clients and how much education you're providing on site at your agencies around best buy and sell by dates. So we do now have these little cards or magnets that I have pictured on the screen here. Hopefully these look familiar to most of you. If you run out of these or have not gotten them, reach out to myself or your PPC. And we can make sure you get more of these, just so you have an on-site resource to hand to clients when there's questions that come up about food safety and how long things are good for. As many of you know, we've also done some delivery schedule changes based on feedback from a lot of agencies that, maybe the truck used to get there on a Friday, but your distribution was on Thursday. So the food was sitting there all week long until your distribution almost 6 days later or 7 days later. And that wasn't necessarily supporting your goal of quality. So those delivery schedule changes hopefully are helping your deliveries to arrive more in alignment with your actual distribution days to shorten that time between when you get the food and when it gets home to the client. We've also done some work on local and brand specific sourcing. So making sure that we are, having some more brand name products in-house for products that are really important for people to have brand name of. So one example of that would be Campbell's soup. People really like the brand name soup specifically, so we have focused on bringing Campbell's in. And also just working with some local vendors that are trusted names and familiar names to people, I think goes a long way. And then finally, it's just feedback loops. So you all have a really close link with the clients that you're serving in the community. So hearing back from you what you're hearing from the clients is always really helpful to us. I think Matt mentioned earlier the client survey that goes out for them to share feedback on our food items. And then on our website too is an opportunity for you all to share just as things come up. If you have feedback on maybe products that you would like to see, products that you think could be better quality, maybe you've seen a brand change and you really like the new brand, or maybe you don't really like the new brands, we would love to hear that from you, because that is our only way of knowing. So on this website down in the bottom corner, the landing page for when you're submitting your orders or your monthly stats, there's a little link on there that should say something along the lines of "we want to hear from you." And if you click on that, you'll be able to submit your feedback to us. And that's really helpful for us, especially in our good food acquisition team meetings, because we are constantly looking at the menu, looking at our brands, and making tweaks based off your feedback. So we really appreciate that from you and hope that you keep it coming.
Caitlin, so now I'm going to take over, and we're going to break down our new standard of choice. So what does choice mean in terms of the good food standard? So first off, it means a choice of foods, and this also includes amount that are offered to clients whenever possible. It means working with clients to understand their food needs and desires and provide as available. And then this includes both culturally relevant foods and foods for those who have certain dietary restrictions. It means providing a variety of nutritious options. And then also ensuring access to foods that are convenient, celebratory, and nostalgic. So we want to acknowledge that providing choice is not always easy. So pantries and food distributions are working with limited budgets, and providing a variety of choice, especially with more nutritious items, can be expensive. Foods for those with certain dietary needs can be expensive, and they also might not be as readily available, especially if they're coming from the food bank. Additionally, depending on the workforce of your pantry distribution, you may not have the capacity to regularly speak with or survey your clients to discover what their food needs are, depending on the population that you're working with. However, it is important to make an effort to have ample choice available. If you think of yourself going to the grocery store, I'm sure that you like to have options and the ability to choose and provide feedback. And we want clients to feel that they can have a similar experience at a pantry or food distribution site. So choice is a really important aspect of good food to have. We want to just show some ways that choice is coming in action here at the food bank. So first off, we want to mention our impact grants for culturally relevant foods. So you might have seen over some communications that we had these grants available for culturally relevant foods. And we're happy to share that there were 13 applications, which resulted in 13 different awards that totaled a quantity of over $87,000 to support those culturally relevant foods in our pantries and distribution sites. Next up, we have a whole bunch of new items and also some revived items that maybe were previously on our menu but weren't for a bit there. That these items have come back onto the menu based on surveys and feedback, both surveys, as we had explained before, going to you all as pantry operators, and also from you getting that feedback from your clientele as well. So for example, now we have broth more consistently on the menu. That came out of feedback and surveys. Smaller quantities of chicken breast was a big one. We used to provide very big bags that wasn't always used in large households, and now we have smaller quantities, which is great. And also getting some more spices and seasonings. That was another a lot of feedback had come back about that, and we have some more options now on the menu as well, or some other options that will be provided shortly. And we also have a couple more that we're going to dive a little bit deeper into in the next couple of slides, but our nutrition ranking system is choice in action. Work with the Healthy Pantry Initiative, also referred to as HPI. And then our nutrition education workshops as well. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each of those. So first, I wanted to show our nutrition ranking system and how that relates to choice. So as the majority of you have said that you are consistently ordering from our menu or are familiar with ordering from our menu, these are probably very familiar with you. These are not all the rankings on our menu that are available, but I wanted to highlight these as not quite the most important, but perhaps the most relevant for what we're speaking about. So the three main nutrition rankings that we typically work with are choose often or green, choose sometimes or yellow, or choose rarely / red. So our choose often green items are our most nutritious items on the food bank menu. These typically include our items such as fresh fruits and vegetables, frozen fruits or vegetables that don't have a sauce or any seasonings to them, whole grain products, low sodium canned items or canned proteins. So these are typically our, as I said, our most nutritious items. And then we have our choose sometimes items that are still nutritious and have nutritional value, but also are not the most nutritious if they're consumed too often. So that can include certain maybe higher sodium canned goods, canned fruits and light syrup, or refined grain products. So either the pasta or white rice, different things like that. And then we also have our choose rarely items, which are considered our least nutritious item, but they still have value on our menu. And typically they are our most non-nutritious just because they have some higher sodium, added sugar, and some higher amounts of unhealthy fats. And I always, if you have worked with me before with HPI or with nutrition ranking, you've definitely heard me say that choose rarely does not mean choose never. And if we think back to those different points of choice, the last point was about ensuring access to foods that are convenient, celebratory, and nostalgic. And a lot of those foods do fall into the choose rarely category. So for example, your birthday cake or the hot dog that you have at the 4th of July. And those are all, very important for culture, for celebration. And these items are things that we don't want to take away from the menu, because to us, as we mentioned before, good food is not just about nutritional quality. It is also about the social aspect. It's also about, these other added things that make life worth living, of course. And then I also wanted to bring up the unranked category, and this is because this is a relatively new category for us. So previously, items such as oils or condiments like salad dressings, if you were familiar with our menu, then those items would have typically gone into the choose rarely category. However, now that we go over to the healthy eating research guidelines, as all Feeding America institutions are, the thinking has kind of changed around these items that they typically help to facilitate healthy eating. So of course, using the salad dressing on the salad, eating vegetables, or the oil and flour, helping to do more home cooking instead of getting food outside the house. And because they're helping to facilitate more healthy eating, they're going into this unranked category so that they're not being counted against you. Again, don't want to say choose rarely as choose never, but we don't want to put them in the choose rarely category anymore. Now, of course, we don't want your whole entire pantry to be of choose rarely items. Going back to that, having a variety of nutritious items being a part of choice. However, you will never hear us saying that you should never have any of those items at all, which is very important. And then we also wanted to touch on choice in the Healthy Pantry Initiative. So some of you might be familiar with that. I know I've worked on a bunch of you with HPI before, and I'm sharing these photos from Valley Food Pantry. I think I saw Rich is on the call as well. So Healthy Pantry Initiative is a program of Just Say Yes to Fruits and Vegetables. It's the program that Sam and I work under. And basically what Healthy Pantry does is that it helps pantries to adopt different nudges and strategies that help clients to make healthier choices when they are available in the pantry. So of course, we just went through all of our nutrition rankings, and we want to make sure that those choose often items and other nutritious items are displayed prominently and are able to be the most easily found when clients are going into the pantry, all with the idea of making the healthy choice the easy choice. So of course, the clients can go throughout the pantry and make whatever selections that they need to while they go in. But in Healthy Pantry, when we are, nudging clients to come in, we are nudging them towards the more healthy foods to encourage. As for you can see here, all the fresh fruits and vegetables. You can see the different beans and lentils and such are on prominent display as protein sources. So this is a really great program to help pantries redesign their way of doing things just a little bit so that making the healthy choice is the easy choice for clients.
So I'm going to jump in here with my part of the JSY program. So I was just scrolling through who was on this call here, and I recognize about 5 or 6 of you that I've either previously worked with or that I currently work with. So for those of you who might not know who I am, I teach the JSY nutrition education lessons that we offer here at the food bank. These lessons are really helpful for food pantries. They focus on a nutrition topic. So whether that be sodium or fiber, hydration, and of course, many, many more topics. What's cool about the workshops too is that we do healthy recipe demonstrations. So I actually bring the materials with me and we make the recipe right on site, and clients participate in making suggestions, thinking how they would change or alter a recipe, and then everybody gets to sample the recipe. People also get a free kitchen tool, which can also be super helpful for those who might currently have limited kitchen equipment. And the workshops can also focus on something in your pantry that you might find to be very difficult to get off of your shelves. So generally, if we talk with a pantry and we find that lentils or canned beef, for example, are really moving slow, we can try to base the recipe demonstration that we do on that particular item to help get it off your shelves a little bit quicker. Sometimes people just need to try the product or need to have a recipe for the product. to really feel comfortable taking it off of the pantry shelves. We also like to talk about culinary skills and food safety, of course. And one of the great things about the workshops, and this kind of ties into the aspect of food being a social thing, is that they create a sense of community. People love to attend the workshops and they come back regularly every month, and it creates a really nice cohort or community of people who all love to talk about food and learn about food.
Thank you, Sam, Mara, and Caitlin, for guiding us through the good food standards. We've thrown a lot at you out there in the audience. We're going to touch a little bit on the next steps with the standards and then get into a discussion, and that should wrap up our time with each other. So after this webinar, we're going to be following up in conversation with our Agency Advisory Council. So this is a group of your peers, partner agencies that we work with to give us food for thought instruction on initiatives in our network that the food bank takes on. So good food is actually, of course, one of those important ones. We're going to share the learnings and lessons from this webinar, share the draft, and that'll help us plan for how we communicate it to the larger network. So you're a small subset of the larger 200 plus agencies that we work with. And we'd like to make this information, of course, available to them all so that we can all be consistently providing good food. We're going to be continuing to offer different supports and resources to assist you with the good food standards. So please stay tuned to upcoming webinars, grant opportunities, and other resources that come through the partner newsletter or through our website, or that you might hear through a county coalition meeting. And you will see questions again about the good food standards on your agency or your partner agency survey. And this will help us measure the progress. So we're doing this initiative to impact our communities, and we want to be able to show positive outcomes. So we'll be asking you questions about the 5-day food package and the perishables and the quality food and choice. And we want to be able to measure from year to year, are we tracking as a network well? Are we showing positive change when it comes to those important items, especially with choice, for example, allowing people to have access to food that's in the best interests of their family? And we also are considering how this good food standard can be part of the 2025 partner agreement that you sign. So a lot of food for thought. At this time, Mara is going to set up some breakouts for us, and we're going to spend the next, say, 5 to 10 minutes. I know we're coming up on time, but we have 3 questions for you, and we're interested in, number 1, your reaction to the good food standards. Just 5 words or less, something like rapid. It doesn't have to be War and Peace, but just what do you think of these? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? The next question is, in what ways is your program bringing good food standards to life already? It is already happening. Please share with your colleagues how you're bringing them to life. I think it would be an inspiration. A lot of the sharing happens among peers. And then finally, what parts of the good food standards do you find most challenging, and what solutions could work? We'll just take a moment for you to look at those questions. And Mara is going to organize the breakouts, and you'll soon be sent.
Well, we talked about the fact that we agree with the good food standards, but cost and storage are 2 big issues. Another issue is, and you've already touched on this, is the whole education, teaching people how to use the things that we want them to take. There's also an issue that I don't know how you solve it necessarily, but if people don't have the kitchen equipment to do what you're doing, or they don't have the spices in their cupboard to do what you're doing, they're not going to take it home and make stew out of it if they don't have a knife to cut the stuff up with, those kinds of things. So that was one of the things we talked about.
Excellent points. Thanks, Pat. Do we have another volunteer?
The parts with most challenging is because of I have probably 6 different cultures at least. coming in at all times. So trying to explain and have the proper foods that they can use. So I have to have a large quantity there to make sure that I can meet everyone's needs. I don't usually have things left on the shelf I can't get rid of at all.
Mhm. And Linda, you applied for and received a cultural food impact grant, correct?
Yes, and I found that because I ask people when they come in whether or not they're lactose intolerant or high cholesterol and things like that, I have that in the notes and I make sure that I meet their needs. And I do get food cards for some because they can go to like a local Walmart or a Aldi's just to get the gluten-free flour that they needed during the holiday.
Mhm.
And the response to that has been overwhelming.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing, Linda.
You're welcome.
Well, you've all been a great audience. Thank you so much for participating in our breakouts. I know the afternoon's kind of challenging. We're going to wrap up. So just some reminders before we go that should you have questions, and we expect questions, you can certainly contact us on the webinar. Also know that you have an amazing core group of programs and partnership coordinators, each dedicated to specific counties. So Aaliyah Williams with Chemung and Tompkins County, Devin McLaughlin with Broome and Tioga counties, and Lindsay Allen with Schuyler and Steuben. They are a wealth of information. They love working with our partner agencies. They want to see you succeed and put these good food standards into action, support you, and spread the news because they learn also from what you do and can bring it to the larger network. So please tap into this trio. And with that said, we want you to know that our next quarterly webinar will focus on food recovery, and that will be delivered by Kathleen Passetti, and that'll happen on May 8th. So we thank you for your time and your generosity and your continued support as we work together to build and sustain hunger-free communities. We wish you a wonderful afternoon and appreciate any feedback you have as you move forward, bringing the good food standards to life. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Matt.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You all.
Matt. Bye.
Thanks for doing, Matt.
Thank you, Food Bank team, for an amazing job. You'll have a nice evening. And thank you, everyone who sat in.
Thanks, Matt. You too.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks all.